Praise be to Jesus. Hi everyone, Charles Whitty here on a Sunday afternoon. Cardinal Robert Sarah said on May 25th in Paris at a launch of his new book that those prelates who, quote, loudly announce change and rupture, unquote, are, quote, false prophets, unquote. Sarah keeps underlining that he is not an opponent of Pope Francis. However, Francis is among those who, quote, loudly announce change, unquote. In October 2014, he claimed that, quote, the world has changed and the church cannot lock itself into alleged interpretations of dogma, unquote. That's from La Nación. In October 2014, he said that, quote, the church should not fear change, unquote. It's from Vatican Radio. In October 2015, Francis insisted that the church can't be a museum but be open to, quote, change, unquote. It's from Reuters. In November 2015, he told an Italian church gathering that Catholicism can and must, quote, change, unquote. That's from Vatican Radio. On June 8, 2019, Francis said to members of the Charismatic Renewal that being afraid of, quote, change, unquote, is a temptation from the devil. Francis has de facto changed the church teaching on marriage, reception of Holy Communion, death penalty, hell, and even the very words of the Lord's Prayer. Now, what I want to say one thing here, and I've talked about the rupture in the church, which there is a rupture. It's not formalized, but there is a rupture in the church, and I believe it'll become formalized in the future. I've said that several times, and that's based on the prophecies of Maria Divine Mercy, who says that at some point Francis will make all clergy sign a document of allegiance to him, and if they don't, they're going to be relieved of, they're going to have to leave the rectory, and that laity will have to put them up and whatever. But there's more to that. But, and you say, well, Maria Divine Mercy, this, Maria Divine Mercy, that, First, a couple of things. First of all, a false prophet is very much liked by the world. A false prophet is never persecuted. It's the true prophets of God that are persecuted, and Maria Divine Mercy, among a bunch of others, has been called false prophets, and her messages have been saying they have theological errors and this, that, and the other thing, all kinds of stuff. So that's really important to recognize. But the reality is, let's take one example. All right. Exactly 1 year before Benedict resigned, she posted a prophecy that said that this was going to happen. All right, that's just one prophecy of hers that came true. Many of her prophecies have already come true. None of them well, of course, we don't know when the prophecy was supposed to actually manifest itself in the world, but many of her prophecies have become true. And any of you who are thinking like world thinks, oh well, her messages have been condemned by the Catholic Church. Well, they were condemned by a bishop who was a modernist, And listen, here, I don't mean to be yelling at you here, but, when someone posts messages that point the, she was like the first one to point the finger at the Vatican and the Pope and said, Satan has entered you. You're false. You've been uncanonically elected. What are they going to do? I mean, of course they're going to shoot it down. That only makes sense, and call her a false prophet. Well, many of her prophecies have come to pass, and when I say personally that I believe this schism will become formalized, I'm not prophesizing, so please don't call me a false prophet. I'm not a prophet at all. I'm just repeating what I believe to be true, and it's my own personal opinion. So, just as, it's no more or no less valuable than any of your opinions. It just so happens I own the channel and I can say what I want, or pretty much say what I want anyway. There's some things I wouldn't say on the channel. And I don't necessarily mean cursing, there are just other things that it's best to stay away from. And, the other thing is, the other point I want to make here is that people like Cardinal Sarah and Bishop Schneider and Cardinal Burke and a few others, I don't believe they really think it's the end of times, as so many of us do. And I think there's a very good reason for that. And I said this once before, but, anymore, I'm lucky to get a few hundred views on a post. So maybe some of you who will listen to me here will hear this for the first time. And that's, if Cardinal, if Sarah and Burke and Schneider came out and said that they really believed it was the end of times, they would lose a lot of people's respect. All right, I just believe that they would just, that's like too far. It's like, you're too far out there. There's no reason to think that, and they would lose respect for these cardinals and bishops, and they would stop listening to what they have to say. I think God's plan for people like Sarah and Burke and Schneider is that they just gradually come to the realization that we've entered into the end of times, and this way people who have respect for these bishops and cardinals will sort of move along with them in more like baby steps instead of them. Even if they believe it personally, I don't think they would say so publicly. Although Cardinal Burke said, I believe last year, that he said he thought that perhaps we were entering into the end of time. So there's an exception, but it's not something they talk about generally. So I think that's really makes a lot of sense, that God would have them keep the respect that they have in the the laity of the Catholic Church, and little by little bring them along to the realization, that it could very well be. And listen, if it really is the end of times, look how much the church has changed since Francis has gotten into power. And, who knows where we're going to be next year. After the Amazon Synod, things are going to change, maybe more than what we realize. We'll just have to wait and see. But who knows what next year brings, and the next year and the next year. So, eventually, if it is the end of times, it's going to become really obvious even to those that are really skeptical. Unless they really want to hold on to all these false teachings from who I consider to be not only a false prophet, but a heretic. I believe Francis is actually a heretic. All right, well, that's what I got to say about that. So take it easy, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.